Welcome back. Veteran journalist and political analyst Karima Brown was laid to rest in a private Islamic rites ceremony in Johannesburg earlier today. She was known to be very outspoken. She also had a big heart and was fearless to the end when it came to her job. South African ambassador to Benin and Togo, Ruby Marx, joins us now live from Benin to reflect on her life. Ambassador, thanks for joining us on ENCA this evening to pay tribute to our colleague, someone that you have known for some time as well. Condolences.
Thank you very much for having me.
So your history with Karima Brown goes back to the 1980s. You knew her at the time as a fierce activist. Take us back there.
Gosh, you know, I refer to Karima as a sister warrior because it seems to me in thinking back that she was born fighting, you know, some cause or the other. And that cause took shape during the 80s when she joined the youth movement in the Western Cape. Hers was a brave voice, it was a fearless voice. It was a voice that helped all of us to find our own voice, our own agency. And I have very, very fond memories of her, deeply respectful memories of her, particularly also when we were at UWC. She was a member of the Release Mandela campaign, and many people might not know that she also played a role in the underground movement to try and link the struggles that we had against apartheid, also with some of the issues that we had with the unbanning of Nelson Mandela and other political prisoners. But through it all, she struck me as someone who, as you said, was completely fearless. And for that, I credit her a great deal because she has done so much to lift others as she herself climbed to the top of her own position. She has always occupied leadership positions. And she's opened the road, you know, for so many other young women and men in the media industry. And so for us, it's a very sad moment. But it's also a moment that makes me reflect on something that I find quite troubling. And that is that we have a very unhealthy political discourse in South Africa. We have a call-out culture, you know. We tend to want to dismiss and to vilify people after they have passed on. And this does enormous damage to the life work of people like Karima Brown, who stood up and was fearless and who spoke truth to power. And so this is something that really worries me a great deal, because our compassion for others cannot just be reserved for those who agree with us. Our compassion is part of the humanity and the values that we hold so dearly as South Africans, trying to create a new society.
Yeah,
and
Ambassador.
That worries me a little bit.
Yeah, so many people have described her differently today, from fearless, passionate, courageous, feisty to controversial. And what many people agreed on was that she was a strong woman working in what often became dangerous terrain. She has been threatened for her work, for her views. What are your reflections of her as that strong woman?
Absolutely. You know, I also want to say that, you know, when she stepped into spaces that I, with other friends of hers, would sometimes fear for her life, because we do have this tolerance, this culture of intolerance to people who may have a different viewpoint to your own. There were many times when she stepped into marches. You know, I remember one moment when she stepped into a march amongst a very antagonistic crowd, and she held up a placard that said, "I am Karima Brown," you know. And so there were many times when we feared for her life, when we feared for the fact that she was living alone as a woman, you know. But thankfully, nothing had happened to her. And she was able to take on those people who were detractors in court at one point and stare them down. And that was vintage Karima. You don't take her on.
And you've spoken about how people dismiss and vilify people after they have passed and people they disagree with. What do you think of the role and treatment of women journalists in post-apartheid South Africa as we reflect on her work, on how she was sometimes treated? What lessons do you think we can walk away with?
I think it was a difficult time for women. I think it's a difficult time for someone like Karima, who had to kick open doors in order to be let in. She worked in a patriarchal system in newsrooms that was very male-dominated, and they still are. And so I would imagine, that she would be described by many as someone who shrill, when she was trying to be assertive, someone who was strident, and someone who was unfeminine. And she had to deal with all of those things. And so in staring down people who tried to dismiss her, and I remember Karima, she always wore red lipstick. It was like a call to arms, when you saw her with that. But she was unapologetic about the values that she stood for. And I don't think I ever heard her use the word feminist, although I've heard her use the F word quite a number of times, because she was feisty and she would tell you where to get off immediately. But I think that she gives young women and young men who are struggling to find their voice, their power, and their agency, I think she makes us all feel a little bit braver. And on a personal level, I want to say that she was an incredibly generous friend. When I started writing, she said to me, if you write, I will publish. And if you speak, I will find a platform for you. That is the kind of generous person that she was. And she also did this because she knew that I was as passionate as she was about where this country and what this country could be. And so her legacy for me, I think is best described probably in today's date, Today's date is March 4th. And what an amazing legacy, because the word March 4th also means to march forward, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I think that there's no better legacy for Karima's life for us to remember to March 4th, until we have South Africa that we want to create.
Yeah. Ruby Marx, I really appreciate your time on ENCA this evening. Thank you for paying tribute to our colleague and someone who was very dear to you as well as a friend. That is Ruby Marx, South African ambassador to Benin and Togo.